Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to you all this evening. We will give everyone just a few moments to enter. I can see the numbers going up, so it's really lovely to have so many people here with us tonight. Just to let you know that this is being recorded, so after this webinar, probably tomorrow, you'll get a recording and copies of the slides. So feel free just to sit back and listen, and then you can have all the material to look at later. Also, just to let you know that we do have a chat feature, so do feel free to ask any questions. I'm just going to type a hello message. If you can let me know that you can hear me okay, maybe a thumbs up or just a message in the chat box, that would be great. And perhaps let us know while we're waiting how old your children are. Oh, fantastic, thank you. Yeah, let us know how old your children are, perhaps what exams you have in mind, if you have specific exams in mind. And yeah, great. We have got a really nice number here today. We had a few hundred sign up, so it's clearly a very important topic. So hopefully we can offer you some useful tips. And let's get started. So a quick introduction to myself. Hello everybody, my name's Laura. I work for Role Models as their head of education, and that involves creating content for a curriculum that teaches a range of skills such as confidence, resilience, communication, all the soft skills. And prior to that, I trained in psychodynamic therapy and I was a school teacher for 12 years. Over to you, Hannah.
Hi. So I am a science teacher by training. I'm the director of Golden Circle, and we offer both tuition and homeschooling. So I mainly lead the homeschooling teams, which is coordinating teams of teachers to work around children who don't attend school at all. And then we also deliver after school tuition for children who are preparing for Common Entrance, GCSEs, A-levels, and I support with the school search and university applications as well. So thank you for having me.
Fab. Okay, so we'll find some bit of time later to tell you a little bit more about both of the services we provide, but let's get started. As I said, to those who are late joiners, just to let you know, this is being recorded and you will get slides. So, growth mindset. This might be a topic that's familiar to you. It might be something that you know of, but you don't know under the sort of the title. But a lot of what we do with the children at Role Models is we talk about the difference between having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset is when you believe your intelligence is set and it's fixed and you can't really affect change. And a growth mindset is when you believe that you can affect change. There are things that you can do. And this for us is really, really important because, and we'll catch ourselves saying it as parents, you know, so often I'll say, you know, I'm not a good runner. I can't run. Like other exercise, but I can't run. But really, if I wanted to be a good runner, there are things I could do. I could do the couch to 5K, I can make sure I get an early night, I can exercise. And using the language I am not good at is so defeatist. And we catch ourselves doing it, and you'll notice your children do it a lot. And this is what it looks like. So sometimes we think that the children with a fixed mindset tend to be children with the low achievement, the low attainment. So they struggle and they believe they struggle and they can't do anything about it. But we also have children who attain well academically, but still have a fixed mindset. So that's the type of learner who perhaps find learning quite easy, but then something will come up that slightly pushes them outside of their comfort zone and they can't really cope. It becomes really overwhelming for them. Then we have this high attainment and a high growth mindset, and that's that ability to access academics quite well, but also know that if you have setbacks and strategy, you have strategies to deal with it. And it's a lot about this word yet. We can't do it yet, but let's empower ourselves with thinking about what we can do. I'm going to take you through some tips that you can do with your children. So what can we do to cultivate that growth mindset? So the first thing is put a real emphasis on the effort rather than the outcome. Now that's sometimes tricky when it comes to exams because we're so focused on the outcome, but actually there's so much with the outcome that's out of our control. So let's focus on what we can control. And quite often that is just about effort, and really praise your children. So even if they get everything right in whatever preparation you're doing with them, that's not to say you ignore that, but you can still say, and I'm equally impressed that you really sat there and you really focused. And that just shows them the value to the effort, the value to the things that they can affect change with. Model and share your own examples. So that for me might be going for a run and telling my children, you know, I really struggle with running, it's really difficult, but I know I just can't do it yet, and I'm going to try. Embrace mistakes. There's definitely a culture of shame when it comes to mistakes. You might not, you know, if you're having people for dinner and you burn something, you know, it quickly goes in the bin, or if you're struggling with something at work, it's not necessarily comfortable to say that. But in your own homes, in your own little community, try and change that, try and embrace it. You know, I baked a cake today and I just don't think it was very good. So next time I'm going to try to really measure the ingredients well. You know, do whatever you can to take the shame away from getting things wrong. And then recognize and praise the progress you've made. And I think that's really key. Progress is the most important thing we can do, just getting better. And those things really help cultivate that growth mindset. So we spoke before about focusing on things that are in our control and not in our control. So this is something that you can do with your children. You can draw it if you think that's something that they'll access better, or you can just explain it to them. But with the example of the exams themselves, what is in our control? So say if it's an interview of some sort, whether or not you go in and you smile, how rested and prepared you are, how much practice you've done, how smart you look. Those are the things that we can focus on. What's not in our control are these things. Now, I'm not saying that children shouldn't be thinking about those things, because it's like saying, don't look up. You know, everyone's going to look up. Saying, don't think about who interviews me isn't going to be helpful, because naturally they will. But I think it's really important just to acknowledge that, yes, whoever interviews you or how well everyone else does are things that can make us feel anxious, but there's nothing we can do about that. So there's no real value in ruminating and giving that a lot of attention. And then there are things like being on time, you know, things that are slightly in your control, that there's an element of being out of your control. This is something you can apply to anything that your children tend to worry about or get anxious about. And if you're predisposed to a little bit of anxiety, perhaps it's something you could try doing yourself. But again, modeling these things with your children, showing them that we really can choose where we give our attention, is key to helping them manage those anxieties. So what can we do? How do we respond? One thing is we say, and it's the sort of a mantra, and it's something I invite you to repeat with your children, is that trying your best is always good enough. And I think that we might sometimes feel our children know that, but there's really value to spelling that out. If you put your absolute best efforts in this and you give it your all, that's enough. The outcome doesn't define you or your intelligence or your self-worth. And on our role models courses, we actually quite often look at people in the public eye who have experienced setbacks in different ways. I actually learned the other day that Vera Mann was a figure skater before she became a fashion designer in her 40s. You know, all these stories about how success isn't necessarily linear, and that's not preparing our children to fail, but it's just saying you don't have to pass every challenge you're given, but you have to give it your best shot. Again, praising and recognizing the process rather than just the outcome. So I'm really proud that you came back and you sat down and you really spent a lot of time focusing on this. And that can be if your child gets every single thing wrong or every single thing right, recognize the process. Then focusing on the outcome feeds the pressure and anxiety. Now, for those of you who are sitting perhaps to enter a school or doing GCSEs and A-levels, and it feels perhaps for you that the outcome is really important, I think that's worth acknowledging that, and then watching how we speak about it in front of our children and making sure they know that the focus isn't necessarily on the outcome. There's so much value in the process. And then again, just thinking about how the way we respond and the way we speak, are we promoting a growth mindset? And this is not coming from a place of perfect parenting at all. It's coming from a place of what can we do to help change that narrative for our children. So responding to anxieties and worries. So this is if your children are actually worried, they are feeling really anxious, or you're not quite sure, discuss with them, what does anxiety look like? You know, and it's not the same for everyone. Perhaps they don't realise that that feeling in their tummy is anxiety. You know, when as a teacher, parents used to say to me, you know, they say they have a tummy ache, but they don't. And you think, well, actually, maybe for them, anxiety is a tummy ache, or anxiety does have some sort of physical symptom, or perhaps sleep is slightly disturbed, or they have a bit of less of an appetite. Have that conversation with your child, you know, normalize that feeling and ask them, you know, what does it look like for you? And then validating it. I think as parents, we're hardwired to sort of not want our children to experience any hardships. So we might find ourselves saying, oh, don't worry, you're not worried. But then if we think about what we need in terms of when we feel anxious, telling somebody we're anxious and having somebody say, oh, no, you're not, or just wouldn't be helpful. So we have to understand that perhaps we have an element of discomfort with their anxiety, and accept that in ourselves and allow them just to express it to us. Model our own examples. I think it's okay to say, you know what, I also sometimes get really anxious, or we were just speaking before about remembering our own exams and remembering those feelings. I think that's really important to be able to normalize and share. And the children don't always know that these things are very, very normal, and we take for granted that they know that we've been through them. Our comfort zone. This is something we do a lot of role models. We talk about how we have our comfort zone and then we have our learning zone. And to step outside your comfort zone doesn't always feel great, but that's where we can really grow. And that's really exciting. Don't worry about the worry. So that's a lot about talking about what anxiety is and how it feels, takes away the mystery for them. So that's really important. You can choose when to worry. We talk a lot with our parents about having maybe a list or a worry time, and then designating time in the week or time in the day where they know that they can talk to you about whatever they're feeling anxious about, instead of it preoccupying them. Part of it is learning to get comfortable with discomfort. And again, that's something as parents we can really struggle ourselves with. We don't want our children to feel anxious, so we'll do lots of things to distract them. But resilience is built through overcoming things. And what a powerful example this will be when they've done their exams, to look back at a later opportunity and say, look, you were really anxious about that. And look how well you coped. Look how you managed. So yes, you might be anxious again, but you will get through it again. We talk a lot about nerves and excitement, sometimes feeling the same in our bodies. So that could be racing heart, a bit of tummy flutters, and talk to them maybe is there some part of it that's exciting. You know, you've worked so hard, that anticipation has really built up in you. Not every feeling you have in your body is necessarily bad. And then the next one is find an opportunity to practice mindfulness and breathing. Again, we do this at the end of each of our sessions. But what I will say is, in the thick of anxiety, do not try and introduce some breathing. Again, if you think about it yourself, if you're really anxious, if you're ruminating over something, and somebody said, let's do some breathing together, it's probably the last thing you'd welcome. Having mindfulness and breathing as part of their routine maybe do it at the end of, before bedtime a couple of times a week. Discuss how it makes them feel and have it as a resource that they can go to once they understand the value of how it makes them feel. So I'm going to breeze through some of these slides because I know we've got a lot to talk about, but here's the reframing anxiety as nerves. This is a little something you can do with them to show them that things feel the same. Another thing we talk about are the power of our thoughts and how our thoughts create feelings and our feelings create how we behave, and how we behave feeds again into our thoughts. So if I'm sat in front of a paper thinking I'm really, really stupid, I'm going to feel pretty rubbish about myself. And the chances are I'm not going to give it my best shot because I feel so defeated already. I don't feel good about myself. And that will just feed into me knowing that I was stupid. Will reiterate those feelings. And I think a really powerful lesson we can give our children is that you don't have to believe everything you think. We can change it. What if I thought I might be able to do this? And again, with that growth mindset, if we're about to do some revision, or if we're about to do some work, what if my thought was, I just can't do this yet? And then the feeling is a little bit hopeful, because I know I just have to work out what I need in order to get there. And then my action might be asking for some help, or asking to go online and do some research, or really just putting down my best efforts because I'm hopeful I can give it a go. And then I'm going to feel better about myself. And again, this is something we sort of learn as adults through life. But what a powerful lesson to teach our children so young that you can really take ownership of your thoughts. I'm going to talk you through some thinking traps. Again, I'm going to try and breeze through it because I know we've got other things to get through and I don't want to monopolize your time. But sometimes your children will say things, and sometimes you probably say things to yourself too. And a lot of what we do at Role Models is just teaching ourselves about sort of ways we talk to ourselves. So one is fortune telling. You might hear your child say, I'm going to fail the test next week. It might also be that you're taking them somewhere new and they say, I know I'm going to hate it. And you probably can think of times that you do it yourself. Now, if you said to your child, you're fortune telling there, I'm not suggesting they're going to say, oh, my fortune telling here. Okay, no, I won't fail the test. It's just a powerful tool to build our children's resilience by showing them things that we can tell ourselves. So when we fortune tell negatively, we're really putting a lot of negative pressure on ourselves. It's just not true. Mind reading, they think I'm stupid. Nobody likes me. Again, just pointing that out. You don't know what other people are thinking, and it's also not your business. Generalizing. I'm always rubbish at maths, or I can never answer these type of questions, or I always mess everything up. And again, point that out, that that's really normal when we're feeling a bit rubbish, a bit low on confidence, that we do that. And we can probably all think of times where we've done that ourselves. To just pointing out to your child that actually you're generalizing, and you did some maths last week and actually you were fantastic at it. So you're feeling really low now, and you're telling yourself that you always get it wrong, but you've actually proved that you don't. Labeling, I'm not clever. And again, I bring you back to that. I'm not a great runner. We catch ourselves doing it, and just think about the impact. And again, you can say to your class, to your children, you're not there yet. If you say, I can't do the maths, okay, you can't do it yet, but what are you going to do to affect change? What can we do about it? And catastrophizing, I won't be able to answer any questions, I'll fail the interview, I'll disappoint everything will go wrong. Just show our children what's happening. Those one bad thoughts are having a knock-on effect, and everything is turning into a catastrophe, but the catastrophe is just in your mind. Nothing has happened. Again, these will not have an immediate effect. I just think it's hugely powerful to be able to recognize these thinking traps in ourselves. So I'm going to touch on this, how to think about rejection. I think this is really important. And I wonder if as parents, this is somewhere that we don't go in our own minds. And then what the impact of that might be on the child. So the first thing I would recommend is to talk about it as a possible outcome. Take the fear away. It might happen that you don't get the result that you want. And that's just a possibility. Again, that rejection is simply a redirection. We go back to Vera Wang and a whole host of even sportsmen and women who have played disastrously before going on to have a tremendous amount of success. Actors and actresses who have gone for roles and been rejected only to go on and have the success a bit later. There are many different paths to success. Academics and exams, and this exam for this specific school is just one path to a happy outcome. Model our own examples, share with children perhaps times where you've been rejected or you haven't got an outcome that you wanted, and share honestly how it made you feel. You know, I went for a job and I didn't get it and I thought, hey, that's fine, isn't going to support them with the feelings that come if they do experience rejection. And we have to teach them how to tolerate those negative emotions. And a really powerful way is letting them know that we have them ourselves. Resist comparison to others. I think that's absolutely key. Our children might be doing it naturally themselves. So I think it's really important to pull back on that, pull back on how other children might approach their learning, how friends, how neighbours. Your child is an individual and they're on their own journey. Each result is one step of a bigger picture, and I think that's really important to explain. And just taking that moment to acknowledge that you can cope with a worst case scenario, and I think that's such a powerful gift to give our children. Again, some simple things to do. I'm not going to go through all of them because, as I said, you'll get these slides, but spend a bit of time talking through the day. What does that look like? Maybe do the journey, maybe think about how it might look, how it might feel. Know your child's trigger points. If getting dressed and leaving the house is going to be a challenge for them, do that way in advance. You know, do whatever you can to preempt any sort of additional anxiety. And then think of yourselves, what do you need to do in order to feel calm? A few shared responses if your children say they struggle. So it's too hard, you're stretching your brain, you're helping it go stronger. Again, that might not always sit well, but if we think about building muscles in the gym, that comes with those really hard weights. I'm scared. Doing new things can feel scary, but remember when. Show them the time that they have done something well. I quit. This is really important. If they're studying and they're really difficult and they say they quit, show me the hard bit, gets them to focus on the bit that they're really struggling with. I'm going to go through some more. 2 minutes here on our masterclass on how we can support children. We have online sessions either on Tuesday and Wednesdays in the afternoon or on Sunday mornings on a range of themes, focusing on building resilience, on confidence, on leadership, on problem solving. They're small group sessions, they're live with one of our role models, they're interactive, they're fun. With every session, the children get an activity that they can do to embed the learning at home. You get a tip, something you can do to support your children. And then you become part of the role model community and your children learn these skills together in fun groups. If you have any questions, please do email us, info@rolemodels.me, and I'm going to be Hannah's assistant and hand over to Hannah.
Thanks so much, Laura. I really like the point around embracing mistakes, because that's something that we really focus on. Our teachers all come from, they've been in education for a long time. They all have taught in a school for 2 years, and we see a real culture around mistakes in schools where children are fearful of them. And actually, we're trying to sort of change that narrative and make sure that children understand that they are an opportunity to learn, and to kind of shift that dynamic. So our focus at the Golden Circle, when we're preparing children for exams, because some of the work that we do is more focused on just boosting confidence, but when it's focused on exams, we are helping children to revise, and the preparation there is key for ensuring that they sort of put their best foot forward and feel confident going into those exams. Obviously, we've just come out of January mocks for GCSE and A-level students, so it can feel quite a pressured time. We just try to help children manage those emotions and understand how to break the revision down so that it doesn't feel really overwhelming. I think often as parents, it's hard to understand sort of where to start with revision, because schools don't teach it explicitly, don't teach the skills explicitly. Some children we often see have reverted sort of note-taking, just taking lots and lots and lots of notes. And that's actually quite a passive process. So in this session, I'm going to sort of show how we would break it down for a child so that they can do it independently with a parent or with some other support, like a teacher. Okay, so looking at this slide, our first sort of top tips to prepare for exams are just breaking down, starting with a revision timetable. And I'm going to look in a little bit more detail on the next slide as to how that would look and what you would expect from that. But it's important that it's specific. Obviously, the session lengths vary depending on the child's age and how long that they can focus for. We're going to look at identifying what type of learner your child is, what types of revision techniques might be useful. We recommend doing a real variety of revision techniques and really focusing on active revision, which involves kind of consolidating learning, processing it in different ways, and then applying it, as opposed to those passive revision techniques, which are quite traditional, note-taking, just lots of repetition. Then I'm going to look at how we test and track progress, and then encouraging self-care, which Laura's already sort of touched on, mindfulness, breathing, that kind of thing. Okay, on to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So creating a revision timetable. It sounds simple. Lots of children like to have a revision timetable because it helps to structure their work, but often it might be very general. And so what we say, the first thing that we say is kind of get a specification. So if you're doing your GCSEs or A-levels, get your subject specifications, which you can get online from the exam board website. So if you're doing EdExcel, AQA, OCR, CIE, they're all available online, and they actually break it down into learning objectives. If you're doing 11 plus a common entrance, you can get the ISCB one online. And then in your revision timetable, we say allocate chunks to specific subjects. You might want them, a different colour for each subject. But then within those sessions, include the learning objectives that you're going to meet, that your child is going to cover in those sessions. And then it's really specific. They know what they're supposed to be doing. They know for what length of time. And then at the end of that session, we recommend that children tick those sessions off and give themselves a RAG rating. So by RAG rating, I mean red, amber, or green, depending on whether they feel confident. So if they feel confident, mark it green. If they are, they feel like they've learned it, but there's some work to do, mark it in amber. And if they're really unsure still when they've looked at the material that their teacher has set, or they've used one of our online revision platforms that we'll recommend in a moment, and they still don't understand the content, mark it as red. And this self-awareness is really valuable. It's helpful for encouraging your child to become a more independent learner, but it also means that when you get to a few weeks before the exam, you can pick out the red learning objectives that need a bit more work, or you can ask someone for help. So we recommend including lots of breaks within your revision timetable. Obviously, if a child is younger, then they're going to need more frequent breaks. And some of our parents really like the Pomodoro technique. So this is where you set a timer, and the timer should be visible to the child. 25 minutes working, and then have a 5-minute rest, and then 25 minutes working and another 5-minute rest. For some children, that's still going to be quite challenging. So if your child, for example, is 7, you might want to set it as a 15-minute timer. they have the worksheet or the questions or the material in front of them that they're going to be doing, and they can see the timer and they just work through for that 15-minute chunk. So it's more of a little and often approach as opposed to sitting there for hours on end. And then within those breaks, ideally, we get children, in our sessions anyway, we get children away from the screen, doing some physical activity. It just helps to maintain more motivation, more positive mindset. You can get them outside, just something where they are switched off entirely from the academic side of things, especially when it's coming to GCSEs and A-levels, where there's a lot of material to get through. I think some children just feel like so overwhelmed that they sit there for 2 hours, say, but actually the information isn't going in. So it's good to take a step away from the screen and then come back to it. Okay, next one. Thank you. So when you're thinking about what types of revision strategies to use with your child, we try and categorize children into what type of learner they are. And children actually fall into, they sort of span across these categories. They don't just fit into one of them, but they might be more of one than another. So we try and think about children as visual learners, auditory learners, and tech-savvy learners. So if you're a visual learner, using things like mind maps, whether that's on a screen or whether that's actually written down, could be helpful. Cue cards, so that might be just bullet pointing your notes. It might be vocab, for example, if you're doing French, a language. Some subjects lend themselves particularly well to cue cards. Science is a good one because you can write model answers and they are great for cue cards because someone else can test you. And then colours and diagrams. So these are all types of strategies that we would recommend for people who are really engaged with visual material. Auditory learners, you might want to do something slightly different. So they can use their phones to record key points, dates, arguments, and then listen back to them. So if you have a child who is particularly interested in drama and enjoys actually acting things out or singing even, we have some children who sing their science material or their French oral, and they will record it and then listen back to it. And actually that helps them to process the information, and it really helps them to remember it for the exam. For tech-savvy learners, and I feel like lots of our children fit into this category, they are far more tech-savvy than I ever will be. There are so many ed tech platforms and apps out there, and at the end of this presentation, we can have a look at a few that we recommend. But if you have a specific subject, there are lots of different subject-specific ones. You can put it in the chat box, and I'll do my best to recommend one. Because it's a great way for children to actually, they're on their phones a lot. It's a great way for children to consolidate the information and have everything to hand. Some of our children don't take notes at all written down anymore. They type it if they're typing in their exams, for example, and actually using lots of different apps for their revision is a brilliant way to process that information. Okay. Brilliant, thank you. So varying revision techniques to improve attention. As I mentioned earlier, note-taking is particularly passive, and there are other things like reading your notes or even highlighting your notes that have been recommended in the past by schools, by teachers. They're just one way of revising. I'm not saying that they aren't a good way to revise, but there are other revision strategies which have proven to be more effective. So research has shown that revising with words and pictures doubles the quality of responses by students. And so we really encourage varied techniques and active revision strategies. So that means processing the information in different ways so that they help to commit the information to memory. So here we've got some strategies that might be useful. Things like timelines, cue cards, which I've already mentioned, online quizzes, songs, mnemonics, mind maps, and presentations. Increasingly, students are using Google Drive presentations to share with their teachers, to write their notes, and then their teachers will provide some feedback, and it goes back and forth. It's the idea that someone can question you and then you can explain it, so you are like the teacher. And some children actually really, particularly some of our younger students, really enjoy being the teacher. So learning the information and then teaching a sibling, a parent, or their tutor.
Hannah, sorry, we've just got a question in the chat box. A parent has asked for clarification on what a multisensory learner might be. How would you know that your child's a multisensory learner?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think most children would fall into a category of being a multisensory learner. Most children will need a range of different approaches to learn at their best. I think just some children respond better to certain cues than others. So, for example, some might lean towards listening more or towards tech more, but I would say almost all the children that we teach, or every child that I have taught in the past, would be a multisensory learner. So it's just you might even have sort of an even distribution between the different types of strategies that you would want to use, but some children are more open to sort of writing or reading or listening than others.
Fantastic, thank you. Am I moving on to the next slide?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, sorry. Just on that last bit, the last point. One thing that can be really helpful is setting up a study group. So that's at school or at home for collaborative learning. So if you are a home educated child, this can be really helpful because you don't actually have peer support in school, and there are lots of home ed kind of local groups where children will be taking similar exams, and actually they can support one another with their preparation and almost hold each other accountable a little bit by doing group work. Discussion is one great way of revising discussion and testing one another. Okay, I'm ready for the next one. Thank you. Brilliant. So practice tests and tracking progress. At the Golden Circle, we don't focus hugely on this until we kind of intersperse it as we go along. But the focus for us is not just the practice test. We do all these other things so that children don't feel overwhelmed when it comes to a test. But we recognise there are so many different ways to learn and to make it more learning fun. The practice tests and tracking progress really are for developing exam skills in the last sort of 6 months in the run up to exams. So prior to that, we will just do an exam question here, an exam question there. But when the 6 months before exams, our students start to take full papers. And that's to practice things like timing. It's to practice exam techniques, so looking for command words and recognising what the examiner is looking for, writing model answers, spotting patterns. So if a child is taking a practice paper and working through it, we recommend having a timer on. Try and stick to the time frame that has been given, and if you can't make it, if the child can't finish the paper in that time, that is absolutely fine. You're just working towards the goal of completing the paper within the time frame. What we really recommend is for parents to support their child to mark the work independently, because there is so much value in looking through the mark schemes and spotting the repeat questions and the repeat answers. If you do 10 papers, you'll see, for example, in 11 plus in Common Entrance, the same style of questions come up again and again. At GCSE and A-level, almost identical questions come up. You might get a question in eutrophication and there's a model answer, 6-mark model answer, that if students have prepared, seen it a few times, then they'll just be able to jot that down. They won't feel overwhelmed by having half a page of lines. And we also help children when they're taking these past papers to track their progress, because what you should see is, yes, you're finishing the paper in a shorter time frame, or you're finishing it within the time frame, which is brilliant, and also that your scores are improving. If they're not improving, it's not, it helps you to identify the gaps. So it's just sort of a stepping stone to making sure that when it comes to the real thing, they know exactly what to expect, and there's no sort of curveballs, as Laura kind of alluded to. You can't guarantee what questions will be in the exam, but the more preparation that you do, the more familiar you are with the style of questions, and children who are prepared tend to sort of do their best, fulfill their academic potential, and that is what we're looking for. Okay, so next slide. Encouraging self-care. Laura has already kind of really emphasized this: building resilience, managing nerves, anxiety. We know that the build up to exams can be stressful. We call this the final push for our GCSE and A-level students, and we promise them a long summer after they've taken their exams. We know that it can be hard because you're doing your learning at school, you're doing your homework, and then after that you're doing your revision. So encouraging self-care, where you're practicing mindfulness, you're including sort of social time, and you're doing some sport, exercise, getting outside, can really help your child to avoid burnout and anxiety. Okay, perfect. So we've got some useful top tips here, and here is a little quote from The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, which is: asking for help isn't giving up, it's refusing to give up. So at this point, if a child is struggling, we say it's so important to reach out and ask for help from a parent, from a teacher, from a peer, from a professional. But useful top tips: we've got healthy meals, enough snacks, good night's sleep and time to relax. Mindful practices, including these now, is brilliant, because as Laura said, if you try and introduce it really sort of late on and you're cramming your revision, you're trying to introduce breathing techniques, it's probably not going to be the most effective. And then physical activity and having enough time to socialize. Okay, and then on to our last slide. So these are just a few platforms that our families recommend, our parents and students love them. Atom Learning and Century Tech for 11+ or Common Entrance Prep. Seneca Learning is brilliant for GCSE and A-level revision. It covers lots of different courses and exam boards, so just make sure that you know what exam board your child is taking for which subjects. If they're taking Edexcel for maths, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily taking Edexcel for English. It can vary from subject to subject. Memrise is great for languages. And Quizlet is used for like online quizzes for a range of different courses, again, exams board and subject specific. And then Exam Papers Plus is great for like 7+, 11+, 13+ prep. So these are handy resources. There are lots of others as well. So if you have a specific query, just drop it in the chat box.
Fab. So speaking of the chat box, there have been a few questions about the masterclass. I forgot to mention there's a 2-week free trial. So if you are looking to give your child, see how your child gets on, if you pop an email to info@rolemodels.me, we can give you a link to sign up for a 2-week free trial. Let them experience the sessions, see how you find it, see how they find it, and then take it from there. Here, which we will send you round, are some book recommendations. We've got clickable links, so you'll be able to just go straight to Amazon and buy them. Quite often, I don't know about with your children, but I can tell my children something till they're blue in the face, but when somebody else says it, it just lands slightly differently. Now, we know that when we work with children, sometimes it can be a bit confronting to talk about their feelings and their experiences. So reading books in the third person, other people experiencing things can be really beneficial to boosting their understanding of nerves and anxiety being a natural survivable process. So we've got some links to these books if you would like to upskill yourself as a parent, and we've got some books for you too. And then we've got contact details for Golden Circle tutors. I will pop in the chat box an email address that you can contact role models. It's info@rolemodels, can't do two things at once, .me. Please do be in touch if you want to try our masterclass, do your 2-week free trial. Both of us have Instagram pages, so follow us on Instagram if you'd like to see some tips, sort of be on the pulse of what's going on with both of us. And yeah, I think we've got time for some questions. So I will invite you to join the chat box. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please do. This is the end of the webinar, so please feel free to leave and enjoy the rest of your evening. But Hannah and I will stay on for a little bit longer if any of you have any questions. We have one question here that says, what do you do the second time around? So what do you say the second time around? Well, first of all, I would say that if your child is going for something again, that in itself is something to celebrate. Celebrate their resilience, celebrate the fact that they're not giving up, they're going for it again. Again, like I said, that we do in a lot of our masterclass, find examples of other people who haven't given up. We have a quote that we use in our sessions, one from Michael Jordan, that says, I've missed X amount of shots, I've lost X amount of games, and that's why I'm so good, because I persist, because I don't give up. And I think those things are really motivating. Normalize going for something again, normalize getting something wrong. They can be deflating. They absolutely can be deflating. And I think that you can acknowledge that as a process. It's not necessarily the most rewarding process. Hannah, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot here. Feel free if you want to say something. I think just accepting that it can make you feel like that, but this doesn't define you is really key. We've got some more questions. Do you recommend help finding study buddies? I think that's probably one for you, Hannah.
Yeah, definitely. I think having a study buddy is brilliant because it can be a peer, it can be a teacher, it can be someone who is a little bit older at the same school, or has just done is the year above and has recently taken the same exams. It can be really helpful just for managing the emotions around kind of building up to an exam and knowing how to prepare for it. But they can also do the academic side of things, so helping them to learn the right information and hone their exam skills. So definitely, that's definitely touched on the collaborative learning point that I mentioned earlier. Even just one person is really helpful for children.
And somebody says how to deal with defeatism. So I think that there are two things. I think there's addressing it in the moment when you see it, which is one way, but the other way is the general attitude, the general skills that you're cultivating at home. And I think it's sometimes better to deal with these things when they're not occurring. So again, that's giving the examples of times where you feel like giving up, something was really challenging, but you've had another go. Like I said, in the sessions, we focus a lot on examples where people do that, because actually as adults, we can acknowledge it's very normal to sometimes just want to give up. Normalizing those feelings. I think the first thing is validating it. And again, if you think about what you need when you come home from a hard day and you just think, oh, I've had enough, this is exhausting. Somebody saying, no, you haven't, it's not exhausting, you're fine, it wouldn't sit well for you. But somebody saying, yeah, I see you are just fed up and you're exhausted and you're trying and you're just not feeling good, and that's really hard, almost makes the child feel seen. It allows them to know that, yes, this isn't always an easy process. I think linking with the study buddy is that normalizing it, and we do that on our masterclass in groups, normalizing experiencing things together. You know, it's one thing you at home saying, yes, this is normal, but actually being with other people who are going through it is key for them to understand that this isn't being done to them. This is just a process that they're going through. Another question for you, Hannah, it says, what's the best way to make learning more fun?
Oh, great question. I think it's hard from a teacher's perspective, where learning kind of is fun, but we recognize that some children find, you know, when you find a subject tough, when it can be the material isn't that interesting, you know, I fully understand why a child isn't that engaged. I think we recommend doing a range of things. So when we teach children who aren't very engaged in a subject, linking it to things that they are interested in is a good first step. So for example, if they're doing English and they're not really interested in English, getting them to do some creative writing where they're rather than answering a question, where they're writing about something that they love, it is a great kind of initial thing to do. So linking it to stuff that they already enjoy, trying a different approach. You know, if sitting down and writing on pen and paper isn't for them, then do something online. Lots of children enjoy being behind a screen more than they do sitting next to an exam paper. And then try taking it out of the classroom. So obviously for me as a science teacher, as a home ed science teacher, it's easier to do things like experiments outside, but you can take maths outside. It doesn't mean you have to write on paper. You know, you can do the 4 operations, you can do different algebraic problems, you can even do it just walking down the street, and it's totally different to sitting at a desk, where some children just do not enjoy that. So I think changing the environment and the approach so that it's not a traditional approach to education is a good way to get children on board and see that actually this subject is relevant, it's interesting, I understand how it relates to my life, as opposed to just it being an abstract pen and paper concept.
Fantastic. Some great ideas to make learning fun. I'm trying to respond to some messages in the chat box. Just a few questions. Somebody asked if our masterclass is for older kids. Yes, we have a group for 11 to 13-year-olds. They cover themes for resilience, but also friendships, how to find your people, how to deal with difficult people, comparison culture, how to go from procrastinating to being motivated. And again, these are small sessions where you're normalizing those feelings. You know, procrastination is something we've all experienced, but let's teach our children how they can become motivated, what they can do to motivate themselves. I think, Hannah, that might be it for us. Again, I'm going to, I've left this screen up for Golden Circle Tutors contact details. I'm going to put in info@rolemodels.me. Do let us know if you'd like information about the free trial for a masterclass, or if you want to chat and see what we can do to support you. And thank you very much for joining us tonight. You will get a recording of this and the slides hopefully tomorrow.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.